of INCEIF, the Global University of Islamic Finance, the Excellencies, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum and a very good morning to all of you. Welcome to the INCEIF Public Lecture and Memorandum of Understanding signing ceremony between INCEIF and the World Bank. As an academic institution, INCEIF strives to play an active role in promoting and creating a platform for thought-provoking discussions on Islamic finance among scholars, regulators, and practitioners. The INCEIF Public Lecture Series, which began in 2007, are part of this effort by INCEIF to encourage dialogue on current issues pertaining to the development of Islamic finance. Today, INCEIF has the privilege of hosting Dr. Mahmoud Mohildin in its lecture series, where he will speak on taking Islamic finance to the next level, key challenges and opportunities. May I call upon Dr. Muzali Muhammad Ali to say a few words and also to introduce our eminent speaker.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another session in the INCEIF Public Lecture Series. The purpose of this series is to encourage an exchange of ideas among academia, regulators, and practitioners on issues related to Islamic finance. Today we are honored by the presence of World Bank Managing Director Dr. Mahmoud Mohildin. Dr. Mohildin is responsible for knowledge development at the World Bank, as represented through the networks, finance and public and private sector development, sustainable development, poverty reduction and economic management, human development, and the World Bank Institute. Prior to joining the World Bank, Dr. Mohildin held numerous positions in the government of Egypt and served on several boards of directors in the central bank, boards of directors in the Central Bank of Egypt and the corporate sector. He was a member of the Commission on Growth and Development and was selected a young global leader of the World Economic Forum in 2005. His professional reach extends into academia, serving as a member of the board of several universities in Egypt and holding leading positions in national and regional research centers and think tanks. As a professor of economics, he has authored numerous publications and articles in leading journals in the fields of international finance and economics. Dr. Mohildin received his PhD in economics from the University of Warwick and a Master of Science in Economics and Social Policy Analysis from the University of York. Dr. Mohildin's lecture is entitled Taking Islamic Finance to the Next Level, Key Challenges and Opportunities. Ladies and gentlemen, may I present His Excellency Dr. Mahmoud Mohildin.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. It's indeed a great pleasure for me to be with you here today. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to start first by expressing my thanks to INCEIF for organizing this event and for providing me the opportunity to address this distinguished audience. It is always a special pleasure for me personally to come to Malaysia, as I really enjoy the great hospitality and exchange of ideas and views. And I always leave here having learned much. This address to you is based on a presentation. I know very well that many of you are fully acquainted with some of the ideas that are here, but I'll try to share with you a perspective on Islamic finance from a practical perspective. This presentation is based on a recent piece that I did for the World Bank on realizing the potential of Islamic finance, and another one that I did for the bank on the links between financial inclusion and economic stability in the Organization of Islamic Countries, the OIC. And the both pieces of work are available. I won't go through the principles much, but basically, in an industry that is based on the prohibition of usury and banning of any form of gharar, and at the same time is trying to establish rules of engagement in finance based on 7 principles, it has to have its own distinctive characteristics and path that is very different from the conventional finance. If you eliminate pure debt, securities from the financial system, if you call for banks to mobilize their deposits based on profit and loss sharing, and in this case they are going to be more like investments rather than deposits. If you promote financing of trade and exchange of goods and services to ensure a close link between finance and the real economy, if you uphold property rights for the individual and for the society and clarify the sources of ownership, if you mandate fulfillment of contracts that deal with trading goods and services, and if you emphasize the principles of morality and ethics in business conduct, and if you advocate the sharing of risk and reward between the rich and the poor through a mechanism and instruments of redistribution of wealth, you are really addressing an alternative path of getting finance intermediated. So there are key questions for these principles. Where is Islamic finance today? What role can Islamic finance play in economic development? What are the key opportunities? What are the main challenges? And what is the contribution of the World Bank as a group in all of that? So here you can see the development based on the data that we collected from different sources by Deutsche Bank, the International Islamic Financial Markets Database, and Ernst & Young and other sources. You can see this steady growth of finance. And if you check the financial system after the crisis, there is very little of evidence that there is such a significant growth of finance in the conventional side of it. Here we're talking about a business that is close to 1.3 trillion if you check the 2011 data. And here you can see there are a variety of developments on the banking assets, on the sukuk, and the assets under management. But while we're mentioning that this growth is significant, at the same time, we shouldn't really be much carried away, because if you take this industry from the global perspective, we are very much under the 1% of the total of the global financial transactions. 1.3 is significant in absolute figure, and these figures, if you relate it to some of the activities in the host countries or the home countries of finance, like this country, Malaysia, you'll see significant deals and transactions. But from a global perspective, there is a great deal of growth in the industry required before you say that this is a very meaningful part of it. But in different countries, as I said, in Malaysia, each time I say a figure, it gets corrected because of the high growth. And last time I remember when I met Governor Ziti, I was quoting a figure of around 21%, and she said, well, it's more than 22% now. And this was only 5-6 months ago. I don't know if I meet her today, what would be the correction of the figure. But This is an example of growth that is happening. If you are checking many countries in North Africa and the Middle East, you see a great deal of growth, and this is another proof of that. You can see the median in terms of change. You can see the growth in the conventional banking sector in the reddish bars, and the bluish ones are the Islamic banking. You can see the growth in the countries that you see growth of 5% in conventional banking like Indonesia. You see a 10% in the Islamic banking side. 9% conventional banking, almost double or more than double of that in Malaysia. And the story goes on and goes on. Last time I checked the figure of Turkey, almost doubled in 5 years' time. And here we take it as well from the investments or the deposit side, compare investments in the Islamic banks and deposits in the conventional banking. You can see this kind of growing share of the Islamic finance. So you cannot ignore it. You cannot ignore it. And you add to this the fastest growth part of Islamic finance, which are basically the sukuk business for sovereign, corporate, quasi-sovereign, and by number and by volume. You can see again this kind of growth from 2006 until 2010. And here Malaysia is very much in the lead of engineering sukuks, developing them, so it is not a surprise to see Malaysia having a share of the global market that exceeds 63%. Last time we checked on average, its share from 1996 to 2010, it was around 63%. Recent updates are showing that the figure could be around 65% in a growing pie of sukuk. And there have been as well some growth in the business in the Gulf countries like in the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia, and other countries as well in this region here and in the Middle East and North Africa. And we're going to be expecting more of that in the future for reasons that I'm going to be sharing with you in a moment. So what role of Islamic finance in development? And as I said, this presentation is based on a recent short paper by in the World Bank publications of premise. And one colleague of mine was very much concerned with the development of finance from a practical perspective, not from the theory, not from the academic perspective, not from research. And he's saying, well, I'm seeing basically three things, which have been actually put in this presentation before the discussion that I had with him. It's basically about the kind of deepening of financial intermediation that the financial transactions based on Islamic Sharia could be contributing, enhancing financial inclusion, and the strengthening of financial stability. And I'll go through that very quickly. Here we make a comparison between the OECD countries, the Club of the Rich, and the OIC countries, but we're excluding for comparison purposes the GCC countries. Because if you put the 6 members of the Gulf Cooperation Councils, the figures are going to be pushing you into the extremes. But here you can see that if you take a measure of financial deepening, which is basically you take the M2, relate that to GDP, and you check what's happening at the same time in the GDP per capita, you can see this kind of strong correlation between financial deepening and the GDP per capita in different countries. Then you take the same measure, M2 to GDP, and you check what's happening in the OIC